Hello and welcome to the video. So today we're going to be looking at the Lumix GH7 by Panasonic. Now I've had my hands on this camera for around 2 weeks now, and I've set up a few different scenarios to test the camera's capabilities. We've done some stuff on the golf course to test the video, whilst I've also done some light beam photography to test the photography aspects of this camera. So yeah, let's get right into the video. So when looking at testing this camera, I set up 2 different shoots so that I could really test out the capabilities. The first one was at the local golf club with my mate Charlie. Now the idea here was it's quite a fast-paced sport, so it's going to allow me to test the slow motion capabilities of the camera whilst also looking at the low light performance because I was going to shoot this in the evening. This new flagship model in the Lumix G series has incredible video capabilities, and along with this it also has a 25.2 megapixel camera for photos. When looking at recording with this camera, you have the ability to shoot up to 5.7K at 30 frames per second, but if you're shooting in 4K like I was, you can shoot up to 120 frames. Now, on this shoot what we decided to do is we hit some drives, we hit some chips, we also hit some putts as well. We wanted to test the camera in a bunch of different scenarios, so sometimes I was shooting in 4K 25 frames per second, and sometimes we were hitting a drive up to 100 frames per second. Now, I have found that this camera handled everything pretty well, especially the low light conditions at the end. With the new and improved phase detection autofocus software, this camera has absolutely no problems when being used in a professional environment. So I also had the camera on a gimbal around 50% of the time. Now the reason for this is because I wanted to see how the camera could deal with being handheld, if there was any lens shake, and I think the camera handled it pretty well. And as well as this, it's a very light camera, which is great when you're just running and gunning. Now, one of the biggest selling points for this brand new mirrorless camera is the ability to shoot in the world's first 32-bit float recording. In turn, what this does is it gets rid of the need to adjust the audio levels whilst you're shooting. Now, this can all be done using the XLR adapter, and this is sold separately to the camera, but you'll have to buy it if you want to reach these capabilities. See, one of the biggest things about this camera that I love is the included fan on the back of the camera. This makes it so you can shoot unlimited video until you run out of SD card space or your camera dies. And that's just amazing in every scenario. You don't want to be worrying about the camera overheating or anything like that. Now, when looking back at the video I shot for the golf, I'm really happy with the results. I think this camera performed amazingly, and especially when you're doing slow motion drives, it just does it perfectly. See, the Lumix GH7 ticks a bunch of boxes. I think that this is an amazing camera whether you're a videographer going on a shoot on your own for the first time or if you're part of a big production. Now there's a bunch of new improvements that they've added to this camera, and especially in the autofocus department. Now when looking at the subject detection of this camera, it has a bunch of new options. Now along with the subject detection for people, for cars, for animals, they've also included trains and aeroplanes. So this camera really ticks all the boxes. With the 13+ stops of dynamic range and the new improved stabilization technology in this camera, I think Panasonic really wanted to stand out. When looking at the photography side of this camera, what I did was I set up a low light scenario where I had only a single light going through a window, put some haze in the room because I really wanted to test its raw capabilities. I think the camera handled this shoot perfectly. Obviously I used myself as a model, so what I did was I set it up on a tripod, put a timer off, and then I got some photos, but I think it handled it like a beast. So the lens I used for this shoot was a 12mm to a 60mm. Now, that being said, I did use a 12mm for most of this shoot because I found that it worked the best for the scenario. But honestly, the camera dealt with everything perfectly. I shot a little bit of video as well, but I think the photos turned out amazing. To finalise, this new addition to the Lumix G series has so many new improvements, along with a few news world's first. So the question is that enough for you to pick it up? I don't know, I think the camera handled everything perfectly. The only issue I had was with the battery, but that could have just been with the one that was sent over as a sample. But once it was charged, it worked amazing. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you to Panasonic for sending me out this camera. I've had an amazing time with it. So yeah, thank you very much guys, and I'll see you in the next one.